Last week we covered up to Genesis 15, so we'll pick it up in Genesis 16 this week, and we're going to point out some things that we may not have seen before. We know how that happens on occasion. But in Genesis 15, it starts with Yah telling Abram that he's his exceedingly great reward. And Abram reminds Yah that he still has no children. And it's his servant Eliezer that's going to be his heir. This is in Abram's line of thinking. But Yah tells Abram that his descendants are going to come from his own body. All right? Yah takes Abram outside and he shows him the stars and he tells him that his descendants will be more than those stars. Abram believed that and it was counted to him as righteousness. And Abram asks, how am I going to know this? And in response, Yah entered that covenant with Abram, but yet Yah was the only one that passed through those pieces. Abram was in a deep sleep. And in doing so, Yah put the responsibility for keeping that covenant upon himself. So, picking it up in Genesis 16, verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, see now, Yah has restrained me from bearing children. Who did she say restrained her from bearing children? Yeah. Okay. Please go into my maid, perhaps I shall obtain children by her. And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. Let me point a couple of things out here. This could be, she might have come up with this idea because Abram had told her that Yah said his seed's coming from his own body. And she says, well, I know that ain't me then. And she says, perhaps I shall obtain children by her. And then it goes on to say in verse 3, or in the end of verse 2, so Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband, Abram, to be his wife, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan. This is another example of Yah may put something upon our hearts now, but it may take a minute for it to come to fruition. There might be a couple other things that we have to do. There may even be a test or two, huh, David? Before we realize what he had told us was going to take place. In fact, he's told us that he's coming back, and it's been a couple minutes since he said that. and he hasn't come back yet, all right? Verse 4, so he went into Hagar, and she conceived, and when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. Then Sarai told Abram, my wrong be upon you. I gave my maiden into your embrace, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. Yah judge between you and me. And so Abram says to Sarai, indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do what you please. And Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she, Hagar, fled from Sarai's presence. Now, Yah is allowing Abram and Sarai to see and to recognize their inability to have the children on their own. He's allowing them to not only to recognize that they can't do what Yah said was going to happen naturally, okay, by man's will, if you will. All right. So don't miss the fact that Hagar, she's carrying the baby, and that's all she knows at this time. We know by way of hindsight, because we've read this before, that it's Ishmael. So in verse 7, after she's fled, now Yah finds her by the spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, where have you come from, and where are you going? And she said, I am fleeing the presence of my mistress Sarai. Note here that Yah knew her name. He knew that she was Sarai's maid. So do you think it was for his benefit that he asked the question, where have you come from and where are you going? No, I don't think so either. And I've said this before. Anytime we feel that Yah has prompted us a question to us, he already knows the answer. It's something he wants us to see and to realize. So in verse 10, the angel of Yah said to her, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly so that they shall not be counted for multitude. And in verse 11, and the angel of Yah said to her, behold, you are with child and you shall bear a son. This is news to her. She knew she was with child, but she didn't know for sure it would be a son. And he's not only saying it's going to be a son, this is what you are going to name him. His name shall be Ishmael. Because Yah has heard your affliction. And he shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of his brethren. He not only knew that the child was a male, a son, he knew the name, and he knew the future of the child, that he's going to be a wild man. For the sake of time, I'm just going to remind you of Isaiah 46:10 that says, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times things that have yet to be done, they're not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand and I will do my pleasure. That's what Yah is saying. He declares the end from the beginning. He knows these things in advance. So Yah opens and closes the womb as he sees fit, and he guides and he directs the life in and out of the womb. You may wonder how I can say such a thing, and that's a great question. But if you think about it, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Joseph, Samuel, Cyrus, Jeremiah, Judas Iscariot, John the Baptist, Yeshua, and the blind man in chapter 9. And he chose us all before the foundation of the world. Now, I want to bring out John 9 for a specific reason. You don't have to turn there. Just listen. I'll read the first 5 verses for you. Now, when Yeshua passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Yeshua said, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of Elohim should be revealed in him. I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. That man was born blind so that he could live his whole life until Yeshua come up to him and healed the blindness, which just happened to be prophesied by the prophets that was going to happen. The Messiah was going to be able to do that. Now, this man didn't know he had to live his whole life being blind for that purpose until this time right here. Now, he chose us too. Ephesians 1:4 tells us he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we may be holy and without blame before him in love. And then in Ephesians 2, 8 through 10, we're all familiar with that. So he chose us, and you've heard me bring up 10 several times. For we are his workmanship, created in Messiah Yeshua for good works, which Elohim prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. He gifts us with a purpose. Going back to Genesis 16. Then Hagar called on the name of Yah, who spoke to her, "You are the Elohim who sees." And she said, "I have also here seen him who sees me." And verse 14, therefore the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. Observe, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram named his son, who Hagar bore him, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. So that was 11 years in Haran, because he left Haran when he was 75. He's 86 now. That's 11 years. Who's writing this? Moses, right? He didn't witness any of this. Remember, we talked about him being told this on the mountain. Okay, now we're going to move on to chapter 17, and this is hugely important. And again, this was told to Moses. He didn't witness any of this. Genesis 17:1. When Abram was 99 years old, that's 13 years later, Yah appeared to Abram and said to him, "I am Almighty Elohim. Walk before me and be blameless. And I will make my covenant between me and you and will multiply you exceedingly." Then Abram fell on his face, and Elohim talked to him, saying, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you a father of many nations." Now I want you to give me a little liberty here, because I'm going to say some things that may be a stretch for some of you, but I want you to think about it. The name change, I propose to you as a new creation. I suggest that right here, Abraham was born from above. Born again, if you will. Okay? Jumping down to verse 7. Yah continues, "And I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you in their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and to your descendants after you." So he's saying here, I'm going to be Elohim to you. Does that imply he's a different Elohim to Abraham? Or does that imply he's not Elohim to those outside of Abraham?
He's not Elohim outside of Abraham. It's only for believers.
Right. And if you need a hint, you might just find a pattern if you go back and read Hosea chapters 1 and 2. That pretty much is a second witness for you. It clears it up. So, in verse 8, "Also I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, an everlasting possession, and I will be their Elohim." This again is a foreshadowing of the kingdom. In verse 17, the word "established," according to the sages and the scholars, means that Yah's causing his existing promise to Abraham to stand as permanent, legally binding right now from the Abraham, from the change from Abram to Abraham. And I believe that is tied to the born from above or the new creation. The name change makes that difference. Verse 9. And Elohim said to Abram, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you, throughout your generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. This is what he's saying. This is the covenant. Every male among you shall be circumcised. And you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised. Every male child in your generation. He who is born in your house or bought with your money from a foreigner and who is not your descendant. Do you guys, any of you guys in here know somebody that was bought with a price? Right. He who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money must be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin that person shall be cut off from my people. He's broken my covenant. Now I want you to pay attention to the sequence. His name was changed, and now this covenant comes in, and the flesh is cut away. I'm going to make this as PG as I can make it. The flesh was cut away from the reproductive process. Okay? You follow what I'm saying? Because we're going to find out in a little bit. Abram and Sarah both know that they can't do this naturally. They can't do it naturally. All right. And he's saying the cutting away of that flesh is going to be the indication. The flesh didn't do what Yah is about to do with Abraham and Sarah after the name is changed. Actually, it wasn't just Abram's name that was changed either, because as you continue on in verse 15, Elohim said to Abraham, as for your wife Sarai, you shall call her name Sarah. You shall not call it Sarai, but Sarah. And I will bless her and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she will be the mother of nations. Kings and prophets shall be from her. And Abraham fell on his face, and he laughed and said in his heart, shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 99 years old, bear a child? He's recognizing again the impossibility of the flesh doing what Elohim is saying. Now notice with me that although Elohim has called out the son that was to come, he hadn't called out the name yet. And there's be more on that in a few moments here. So in verse 18, Abram said, pay attention to this too. Abram said to Elohim, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. And then Elohim said, no, Sarah your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful, and I will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you this time next season. Paraphrased, Ishmael is born of the flesh, not being born from above. And then he finished talking with him, and Elohim went up from Abraham. So Abraham obeys in verses 23 through 27. He obeys immediately. Moving on to chapter 18 quickly. Yah appeared to him by the terebinth tree of Mamre as he was sitting at the tent door. We're all familiar with this story. Everybody in here is familiar with this story anyway. So he lifted his eyes and he looked, and behold, there were three men standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and he bowed himself on the ground. And he said, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves here. And I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. After that you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant." And they said, "Do as you have said." This hospitality was a big thing in that culture. So Abram hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quickly make 3 measures of fine meal and knead and make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf, and he gave it to the young man who hastened and prepared it. So he took butter and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Now we read that in just less than a minute, but it took a while to get this stuff prepared. In verse 9, then they said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "Here in the tent." And he said, "I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah, your wife, shall have a son." And now Sarah was listening at the door of the tent, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age, and Sarah past the age of childbirth. Again, reinforcing the inability for them to do, they can't carry out what Yah says is going to happen. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, "After I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also?" And in verse 13, Yah said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, I will surely bear a child, or shall I surely bear a child when I am old? Is anything too hard for Elohim? At the appointed time, I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah will have a son." Now, both of them have laughed. Sarah didn't laugh. She laughed to herself. And Yah still knew not only that she laughed, but knew what she said. In verse 18, but Sarah denied it, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And he said, "Nah, but you did laugh." You see, God is showing Sarah that he sees and hears what's going on inside. Both Abraham and Sarah recognized the impossibility of what Elohim said and laughed. They knew that in the flesh it was impossible. They can't do what he's saying is going to be done. So that removes that possibility. So if they can't do it, who is the one that has to do it? Elohim has to do it. It just boils down to that. Let's see. Where was I? Let's see. Okay. All right. So in verse 16, then the men rose from there and they looked towards Sodom, and Abram went with them and sent them on the way. And Yah said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him." Now, I'm not going to read through the rest of that. We're familiar with that story. Abraham asks several times if there's so many righteous, and it gets all the way down to just a few, right? And I want to ask you a question. Actually, I'm going to plant a thought. And you can mull on this. Was Abraham interceding for Sodom, or was Abraham interceding for the righteous?
righteous.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Because Peter tells us, I don't know if I put it in here or not, but Peter tells us that Sodom was righteous. Or I mean, not Sodom. Scratch that. Yeah. How about we go Lot? I backed that up. Lot was righteous. All right. Chapter 19, real quick. Now, the two angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was there sitting at the gate. And when Lot saw them, he rose to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face to the ground. And he said, "Hear now, my lords, please turn into your servant's house and spend the night, and wash your feet, that you may rise up early and be on your way." And they said, "No, but we'll spend the night here in the open square." But he insisted strongly. So they turned in to him and entered his house, and they made him a feast and baked unleavened bread, and there they ate. And jumping down to verse 12, you know all that went on there. Now jumping down to verse 12, the men said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here? Son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, or whomever you have in this city, take them out of this place. For we will destroy this place, because of the outcry against them has grown great before the face of Yah. And Yah has sent us to destroy it." Yah sent them to destroy the city of Gomorrah, or Sodom. So Lot went out and spoke to his son-in-laws who had married his daughters and said, "Get up and get out of this place, for Yah will destroy this city." But his son-in-laws thought he was joking. And when the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." Jump all the way down to verse 22. "Hurry, escape. Therefore, I cannot do anything until you arrive there." Therefore, the name of that city was called Zoar. They couldn't do anything to destroy the city until the righteous was clear of it. And here's where I put 2 Peter 2:6. "And turning to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, he condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly. And he delivered righteous Lot, who was oppressed by the filthy conduct and the wicked." All right, that was 19, pretty quick too. Genesis 20. "And Abraham journeyed from there to the south and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and stayed in Gerar." Now that's about 2 miles northwest of Ziklag, the best I could pinpoint it. That's where they were at. So they're down in the southern part, just kind of northwest of Ziklag. Now Abraham said to his wife Sarah, said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. And Elohim came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Indeed, you are a dead man, because the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife." But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, "Lord, will you slay a righteous nation also? Did not he say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she even herself said, 'He is my brother.' In the integrity of my heart and innocence of my hands, I have done this." So Abimelech's saying, "I'm clean of this. I didn't touch her." And Elohim said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart." What's the next part say? "For I also withheld you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her." He controlled that. He controlled that. Okay? There's going to be no question that this child that is conceived and birthed by Sarah came from any place but above. Every possibility is being eliminated. And in verse 7, now therefore restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you did not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours. So Abraham prayed to Elohim, and Elohim healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female servants. Then they bore children. How did he punish them? Closing up the wombs, right? For Yah had closed up the wombs of the houses of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. All right, moving into chapter 21. And Yah visited Sarah as he had said, and Yah did for Sarah as he had spoken. She conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the set time which Elohim had spoken to him. For Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, who Sarah bore, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised Isaac when he was 8 days old. What does the number 8 signify? New beginnings. And that's the day that the circumcision is supposed to, that's the day that the flesh is supposed to be cut away. It's pretty interesting. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. And Sarah said, Elohim has made me laugh. Now it's a different kind of laughter, and all who hear will laugh with me. Laughter of doubt turned to laughter of joy. In verse 7, she also said, who would have said to Abraham and Sarah that Sarah would nurse a child? For I have borne him a son in this old age. In verse 8, the child, okay, let's hold up there for a second. Just what Yah said was going to happen, happened. Okay, now jumping down to verse 8, we see a little bit of a turmoil kick up here. So the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. A son of the world, if you will. Therefore, or of the flesh, however you want to look at it. Therefore she said to Abraham, cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac. And the matter was very displeasing in Abraham's sight because of his son. It was displeasing. Abraham didn't want to get rid of him. He'd spent 13 years raising this child. Verse 12. But Elohim said to Abraham, do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad or because of the bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman because he is your seed. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water, and putting it on her shoulder, he gave it to her and the boy. He gave it and the boy to Hagar and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness in Beersheba. Now we're going to jump to verse 22. Chapter 22, verse 1. Now it came to pass after these things that Elohim tested Abraham. And he said to him, Abraham. And he said, here I am. And then he said, take now your son, your only son, Isaac. You ever wonder about that? His only son, Isaac. Didn't he have Ishmael? We just heard he had Ishmael. That's the importance of this passage. Ishmael is a son of Abram, but since Abram's name was changed, as we look back, it is a son of Abraham. It's both, but you got to rightly separate it. Ishmael is a son of the flesh and a son of Abram. Isaac is a son of the, I'll say a son of the Spirit, born from above, and he was born not only after Abram's name was changed to Abraham, he was born after the flesh was cut away. Okay? Whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I shall tell you. Now, jumping down to verse 12 of Genesis 22, and he said, do not lay your hand on the lad. He's up there. He's got him bound. Okay? He's ready to thrust a knife into him. Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear Elohim, since you have not withheld your only son from me. Now, Abraham knows that there's a covenant going to happen, and he's going to have descendants as big as the stars, or outnumbering the stars, right? And here he is, in obedience, strapping Isaac down, ready to take his life, offer him as a sacrifice. That's why the writer of Hebrews says what he says. Or was it Paul? One of them considering that he could bring him back to life. Hebrews? Is it Hebrews? Okay. The writer of Hebrews tells us Abram was just obviously considering he could bring him back to life. But he knew that he was going to be obedient to what Yah said. Would this be one of those hard testings, David? This would be one of those hard testings. Okay? Jumping down to verse 16. Yah says...
in there too is that was on the third day.
Right. It was on
the third day. It's like a picture of the resurrection.
Right. So moving on to verse 16. By myself, Yah says, I have sworn, because you have done this thing, and have not withheld your son, your only son. I was just calling out your only son again. Okay. So go back up to verse 3 in chapter 22. I was just pointing out those two verses where it said he was his only son. All right. So Abraham rose early in the morning, and he saddled his donkey, and he took the two of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. And he split the wood of the burnt offering, and he arose and went to the place where Elohim had told him. Then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes, and he saw the place afar. And as John pointed out, there's something special about that third day and that particular location that takes place a little bit after this, a few chapters later. Verse 5. And Abraham said to the young men, stay here with your donkey, and the lad and I shall go yonder, and we will come back. Verse 6. So Abram took the wood of the burnt offering, and he laid it on Isaac, his son, and he took the fire in his hand and the knife, and the two of them went together. And Isaac spoke to Abraham, his father, and said, my father. And he said, here I am, son. And he said, look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? So Isaac obviously knew what was supposed to take place with a burnt offering. So Abraham said, my son, Elohim will provide for himself the lamb for the burnt offering. And the two of them went on together. Verse 9, so they came to the place which Elohim had told them, and Abraham built an altar, placed the wood in order, bound his son Isaac, and laid him upon the altar. And Abraham stretched out his hand. He took his knife to slay his son. But the angel of Yah called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here I am. And he said, do not lay your hand on him or do anything to him. For now I know you fear Elohim, and you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. It's amazing that Elohim he's painting these pictures for us that continue through Scripture all the time. And if you look at it at the right angle, it's like looking into some sort of prism, or you're looking at a great big puzzle or whatever. No matter how you slice it, it comes down to Yeshua, and it points to Yeshua in one way or another. No matter how you slice it. In verse 10, he stretched out his hand and he took the knife. Oh, wait, I already read that. Okay. Verse 13. And Abram lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. So Abram took the ram and he offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. Verse 14. And Abram called that place Yah will provide, and he said, and it is said to this day, in the mount of Yah it shall be provided. Verse 15. And the angel of Yah called out to Abraham a second time. And in verse 16, by myself I have sworn, says Yah, because you've done this thing, you've not withheld your only son. Blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply you. Descendants as the stars of heaven, and as the sand of which is on the seashore, and your descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies. In your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. Verse 19. I'm going to read this, and I want you to tell me if you've got anything that, if yours says anything different. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose and went out together to Beersheba, and Abraham dwelt at Beersheba. Anybody say anything different? Remember, it said Abraham told them, lads, we will return. It doesn't say we returned in verse 19. Oh, you're splitting hairs. No. It's just as important to understand what the Spirit leaves out of the Scriptures as it is to what he puts into it. He's painting that picture. There's a time when the Son and the Father are going to be separated. Okay. All right. So now your homework for this week is to go back and read this Genesis 24. The story, that's the story of Abraham, the father, sending Eliezer, the spirit, to find Isaac, his son, a bride. It should ring a bell. Actually, it should ring a couple of bells. When you think, why do I think Eliezer is a servant? Well, Eliezer is the servant that was called out in Genesis 15:2, I believe. Eliezer is the one that's called out in 15:2. So he was the most trusted. If Abram thought he was going to be his heir, he was the most trusted. So he's the one that was sent back to find the bride for Isaac. Now, Strong's definition, let's see. Strong's definition of Eliezer, the God of help. The name means the Elohim of help. In John chapter 14, verse 26, Yeshua said, "But the Helper, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you all things and bring to your remembrance all things that I said." The Spirit is still gathering. I went back through that story I'll close with this. In Genesis 24, I read that like 2 or 3 times this week as I was going through it, listening to it, reading it. And Brad Scott brings up those 10 camels
Good teaching.
being the Torah, right?
Yes.
Okay? Which kind of means, if you allow me to stay in the Sod mode here, when she watered all the camels, she attended to the Torah, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to carry that a step further. David taught on Monday, started getting into the parable of the 10 virgins. You read through that 1,000 times, and you go over and over and again. What does the lamp signify in the scriptures? The lamp, your word is a lamp unto my feet. Yes. So there's a bunch more. I've got 3 more teachings that I'm trying to shoehorn into dovetailing off of this coming up over Sukkot. But hopefully David and John and I are going to bring y'all some good word as y'all leads as we go through Sukkot. So with that, has anybody got any questions or comments or rebuttals or? Okay, yes, sir.
I would just like to comment on a little bit of thought. So, right, Abraham goes to the mount, and then he knows the Allah is going to provide a sacrifice, right? And this is before the written, the word written on tablets of stone. I love to think about this because, this is something that I know that I've contended with people, folks not quite seeing the Torah being relevant. So the question: how did Abraham know that he was going to provide that sacrifice? Before everything written on stone, before all these things that are typically attributed to Torah only being applicable at this one point in time. And I think it's Jeremiah 31:33, right? He writes his Torah on our hearts in the new covenant. I would say that was back at the point when we were probably a little closer to that. Abraham had his commandments written on his heart. Unlike we got to that latter time in the wilderness where people's heart condition, I'd say, had a worse tendency on the tablets and reading written things. So.
It is definitely a sign that the Spirit was within Abraham.
Yeah.
And when you get to what Paul writes,
Abraham was made for that time.
Mm-hmm.
You have to look at the genealogy, and he was made for that time. So it wasn't a happenstance.
No, absolutely not.
It was from the beginning. It's just like he started in the beginning, he reveals the end.
Mm-hmm.
He reveals the end all the way through the scriptures.
Right. And some of you may have testimony about this, but there's a scripture that says, and the peace that transcends all understandings will guard your heart and your mind in Messiah Yeshua. That's a spiritual peace. That's not something we can gin up by ourselves. Anybody else? Okay, these are available on YouTube, so keep that in mind if you need to hear it again. All right, with that, it's time to thank you.